Coming from Central Kentucky, land of horses, bourbon, and basketball, straight to your ears, ChickenCoopGuides.com presents AgriCast Digest, your place to get news and information about anything agriculturally related. Please welcome your host, Gabrielle Yoder.
So we talked about what you recommend to people who want to improve their health, which is to avoid grains, get rid of the fungus and things. And they can find out more about that on your website watching your show. And I had a silly question, but I'm going to skip that if you don't mind. But we have some questions for our listeners. I want to make sure we get those in before you have to go. I've got one from Vito Modica, and he asked if I keep 4 tons of feed, and he has soy and wheat, which I feel pretty strongly about, but I'm not going to say anything about that. But he keeps his feed in a silo. How quickly do I have to use it before it goes bad?
So that's a great question. It may already be bad. See, our grain supply is so vulnerable to altered weather conditions. As you know, here in Texas, we just had a 16-inch month of rain. I mean, it's incredible. So flooding or drought will cause the original seed to grow up, and if it dies, it'll become very, very vulnerable to mold or bacteria overgrowth. And that just is rolled in with the rest of the rolls and the rest of the feed. So I hope what's his name? Is it Vito?
Yes, Vito Modica.
I hope Vito understands what we're talking about today. If I was rolling up all the bales, what I would do is add green. I mean, I would find alfalfa, I would find wheatgrass, I would find spinach leaves, or treat with some inexpensive herb. Clove costs nothing. If you would, so you have fungal potential in those big 4-ton rolls, put antifungal potential in there with them. And I think you'd stand a much better chance. Remember, in a silo, it's hot, it's going to sweat. That moisture will encourage fungal growth. So use it as quickly as you can. Don't let it sit in there for a few summers, or you can bet there's a lot of mold growing in it, Vito.
Yeah, and if it's something like corn, it can get, Ergo, that one that makes, the one that they thought that Salem witch trials was, made everyone crazy or something.
Yeah, it's ergotamine, or ergot is the mold, and it got in the brains of these women, and they went crazy, as we still do in America. And now we have institutions where we keep those people. Yet not one psychiatrist says, "Oh, it's ergot in the brain." Ergot is a mold that grows on rye bread, which they ate hundreds of years ago. So you got to be very, very careful. I mean, I think many medical symptoms, as you may know, I just published a paper in Oncology News that said fungus is the cause of many cases of cancer, but yet they're being called cancers, and I cited references. So cancer, heart disease, diabetes, hypertension, these things I believe are intimately linked with our dietary mycotoxins and fungus.
I think that there's going to be more... if they can make money off of treating it as antifungal or anti-yeast or something, then I think that they'll make something that'll cure it. But until that time comes, I don't think anything's going to come on the market, or there's going to be any type of acknowledgement of that theory. Let's see here. I've got a listener question from Donna Hughes. Now, she says, I not only have poultry but horses and the Nigerian dwarf dairy goats who get a sweet milking ration mix of pellets with textured grain products, all commercially sprayed with molasses. What can I do to protect that from mold in our hot southwestern Oklahoma weather? I think that kind of goes in hand with the previous question, though, that it's probably already...
It does. In 2005, by the way, these two researchers in England found that aflatoxin poisoning. Now, aflatoxin is made by Aspergillus or Fusarium mold, and it causes cancer, human cancer. So it's that poisonous. They found that if they put doses of green leafy vegetables, spinach, broccoli, kale, etc., in the feeds, the chlorophyll could prevent and reverse the effects of aflatoxin poisoning. So once again, greens plus grains equal better health. Grains alone, questionable. Greens alone, very healthy.
Yeah, and it also feeds the mitochondria of our DNA. I think you had Dr. Terry Walls on your show.
Yeah.
I haven't gotten a chance to see that one yet. I unfortunately don't have as much time as I'd like, but I really
right.
love her.
Especially with 4 kids.
Yeah, I really love the things that she's discovered, and her personal journey is really inspiring. So it makes sense that the greens would. So basically your suggestion for both is to just increase the greens dosage, reduce the amount of grains. Now, what about for poultry and stuff? With poultry, I always suggest giving greens anyway, but what could be like a maybe a substitute? Like I usually recommend something that's corn or soy free. I don't, I've recommended a lot of homemade stuff, but it does for chickens, like, I usually suggested wheat.
Yeah. So I have maybe a question for you. I'm not real good in agricultural science, but I'm learning from you guys. I love the work you're doing. But I had a guy on who has grass-finished beef, and man, I sold tons and tons of his beef, and I ate a lot of it, and I loved it. I believe it is the antibiotics, it's the zeranol, it's the hormones that we're infusing in animals that is causing all of our health problems, breast cancer, et cetera. And it's, if you're grass-fed and grass-finished, maybe not so much. And I said to him, what about your chickens? And he said, we don't give our chickens corn. And I said, I asked the typical, logical, dumb question. Well, what in the world do you give them? And he said, we give them nothing. They go out and they eat weeds, which are green. Yep. They eat grass, which is green. They eat bugs, which they digest perfectly. Yeah. And I thought, holy cow, I had no idea. I thought, I just looked at the great old movies. My wife and I love old movies, and there's always a farmer throwing corn out there. And he said, no, we give them nothing. And they thrive, and they run around, and they get big muscles, and the legs and the thighs are muscular. And I thought, wow. So that's what I agree. Look, soy is genetically modified today. It's very difficult to find anything, tomatoes, that aren't genetically modified. We're an experiment, I think. Yeah. We're an American experiment. So we have to be very careful. And if we can get good meats, goats, lamb is so good right now. And it's always good because we don't have to give them antibiotics and hormone. We don't sell cows based on IQ or good look. We sell them on weight. And so it's agricultural's responsibility to get them on hormones, get them on antibiotics, get them on medicines, and make them fat, so they'll sell for more money. And that's, I think, very unfortunate. But yeah, you're right. We've got to be careful of what we're eating, what we're putting in our mouth. And if we are, we may live long, healthy lives.
Yeah, that's the ultimate goal, I think, of everybody. For our listeners, for poultry now, you have to have about 1/4 acre per hen. And this is, I guess for you too, you have to have about 1/4 acre per hen to let them pure pasture like that. For a lot of our listeners, they have smaller like homesteads that are like on an acre or two, and they might have 10 to 20 chickens. So, for them, I think, I don't know, would you think, is there any type of wheat that you can recommend, or maybe oats? I mean, what are the lowest mold grains that they could give their chickens? I never recommend corn or soy. Those are the 2 top no-nos, but what else could they possibly give?
Gosh, there's so many. We have a phase 1 and a phase 2 diet. And on the phase 1 diet, we say stay away from wheat and corn and yada, yada. And as we introduce foods, I felt 40 years ago when I developed these diets, man, every dietitian in the country's on me because going off grain is un-American. Yeah. So I better put grain back in. So I'll tell you, oat is an amazing grain in that it contains beta-glucan. It's the glue that holds oats together when you cook them, or you can activate it via saliva and so forth. So I would look at things like oat, and then I would look at seeds. I would look at quinoa, amaranth, buckwheat. Instead of those are all seeds, and seeds aren't really vulnerable to mycotoxin exposure or overgrowth. We're now recommending, our diets or our recipe books are all based on eating seeds instead of grains. And my gosh, are people happy? There's a company that makes tortillas. They're called Guiltless Foods out in Austin, Texas, that makes seed tortillas that roll up and don't crack and break. And I've got every child in the world rolling up a hot dog, in a tortilla that he loves. So it's really exciting. The demand in stores now is, I really don't want to eat grains anymore. Yeah. And I think that's very powerful. So look at seeds or look at oats, things of that sort.
I think, I have a homemade I have a homemade recipe we have for chicken feed. I think I'm going to revisit that and see, because you have to be careful with the protein content if you're giving them, pure feed. So I think, I'm going to go look at quinoa, amaranth, and oats as a substitute for the wheat. Yeah, you have to play with the starch, and the protein content has to be just right, or it can kind of make them sick. So,
look, I just gave you an entrepreneurial
awesome
thought.
Idea.
Yeah, I can see it now. Gabriella's chicken feed.
No,
I want 10% of the royalties.
Yeah, no, I'm just going to write up the recipe. They can make their own feed, I think.
Exactly.
I would much rather them do that. I don't want to market anything like that. Okay, so I've got 3 more questions for you. I've got one from Nancy in New Jersey. She said, I had a rooster die of uric acid buildup. It was all in his vital organs. I had a necropsy done, and there were no parasites or worms in his bowels. How does that happen, and what can I do to prevent it from happening to my entire flock?
Oh my gosh, you've got such a smart audience. Congratulations. These questions are huge, and in the human market that I deal in, we believe, or we say via these bombarding ads on TV, well, everyone knows that uric acid causes gout. A deficiency of uric acid or an excess of uric acid causes gout. Okay, so my question is then, Nancy, why did the rooster die? Uric acid is a mycotoxin. In avian gout is caused by Eusporin. You probably know that. It's a mycotoxin. And so this bird got into Eusporin, and it's spelled Oosporein, and it probably was in its feed supply, and it causes gout. And gout can cause death. The bird died of a mycotoxicosis. It ate too many mycotoxins, and that causes uric acid buildup. Same with gout. Gout in the human market is called the beer drinker's disease, to the extent that the yeast is brewer's yeast, and the poison it makes is called beer. It's really interesting that so many beer drinkers end up with sore big toes and gout. But gout can become, or uric acid can become systemic, and it's caused in the bird world by Eusporin. So this bird got into some feed that was bad, and that's what caused its death.
Wow, that is really interesting. So what kind of feed do you think that came from? They would
have to, here's what I recommend people do. Is take a little bit of that feed that they might still be feeding the roosters to any school with what we call an HPLC, a high-pressure liquid chromatography machine. They will be able to very quickly and inexpensively analyze it and say, oh my gosh, it had 4% Eusporin in it. Don't use this anymore. Use a different, and once again, I'm going to drop back to this seeds versus grain. The quinoa, amaranth, buckwheat, foods like that instead of the grains, which do very commonly have these fungal poisons in them. And Eusporin is the mycotoxin. So that's likely what happened to this poor rooster.
That is so good to know. Okay, so it'd probably be a university or something, I reckon.
Any school, and especially farmers. The world loves farmers like the world loves the military, our veterans. And so any farmer coming in, when I used to work out there, any farmer coming in, with a baggie of something, they would test it for them. So just let them know you're a farmer and you just want to know if anyone can analyze and look for Eusporin, and they'll find it. Avian gout is caused by Eusporin. Yeah. And that's unfortunate, but they got into some contaminated grain more than likely.
Wow, that's something I'm not sure if that's going to be in his scope or not. I'm not sure if we should ask him, but I'll put it on anyway. So I'm glad I left it there. Awesome. Now I've got the next question from Sherry in Kentucky. She says, when people take garlic, caprylic acid, oregano oil, that, et cetera, that are both antifungal and antibacterial, doesn't it kill off everything like an antibiotic would? I guess like she's talking about like when you suggested taking it internally to kill fungus.
Right.
So she's asking if it would kill off, I guess, all the good stuff too, is I think what she's saying.
Again, a great question. If I'm taking oregano and caprylic, by the way, caprylic acid is sodium caprylate that comes from coconut. It's a harmless fatty acid from coconut, and it kills fungus like crazy.
And what's in coconut oil?
So, coconut oil, that and lauric acid.
I was just going to say, lauric acid, I thought that was the one that did it.
Exactly. So, great question. So what she's saying is, wait a minute, Doug, I don't want to kill off the good guy, good bacteria. The doctors are now saying, okay, it exists in the gut. Or I don't want to kill too much fungus. What do I do? Sometimes caprylic acid, and at the hospitals I worked at, I'd put people on oregano oil or any of these. Vitamin C is antifungal. Vitamins and minerals are antifungal. That's why people who take them feel so much better. So when people do that, some of them, I got a sore throat coming on, I'm sniffling, my eyes are itching, I think I'm getting the flu. So they start downing vitamin C and caprylic acid. I'll be darned if 80% of them don't get the flu. But 20% do. And that's when you turn to bigger guns, like antibiotics, antimicrobials of one kind or another. And remember that a small percentage of those die. So it's where your infection is during its course, not which drugs or which naturals you throw at it. If you didn't treat with vitamin C or caprylic acid, it would probably need antibiotics 3 or 4 days down the road. But remember, we are a nation that has become, and including our animals, we have become antibiotic resistant. That's because we've had too many antibiotics thrown at us. You just heard me say that brewer's yeast is the yeast and the poison it makes is alcohol. Well, penicillium is the mold, and the poison it makes is called penicillin. So be very, very careful. In tiny, tiny doses, penicillin kills tiny, tiny bacterial organisms. In larger doses, it kills bigger organisms. There are now 6 cancers linked to antibiotic intake. So be very, very careful of overdoing medication.
Yeah, I think back to my childhood, and I mean, everyone still does to this day, I think, overuse a lot of antibiotics, and just makes me shudder and cringe, and how misinformed we've all been for decades. Now, it's really interesting you mentioned the vitamin C thing, because I read, you remember the whole swine flu epidemic, pandemic thing that they said, I remember reading about a woman, and she had done some research. Her husband was in the hospital. He was dying of the swine flu, and she managed to get a court order to convince or to get the hospital to give him an IV of I think very high doses of vitamin C, and he lived. He survived, and it brought him back. So I guess that kind of gives an indication that it could have, a fungal root, like you said, vitamin C kills fungus. So, I mean, either way, it did something. And it was a much better cure than...
Our time is coming, which is very, very exciting. Hospitals, pharmacies, doctors' offices, we've reached our peak with drugs. We've been raising money, the Komen Foundation for decades, funding breast cancer research. Nothing's really happened. We're never going to cure any disease until we realize its origin. And very often these cancers do have a fungal origin. And this is the cool thing. You and I can walk into a health food store and pick up, did you know cinnamon was reported a few years ago as more toxic to mold than diflucan, the one-pill vaginal yeast cure is diflucan, and it's only prescription. But cinnamon, and it's got to be USP, pharmaceutical-grade cinnamon, was more potent in this study than the medication. Folks, if you change your diet and listen to what Gabrielle is telling you, I'm really convinced we don't need all these drugs. I mean, Ruth and I just mute the TV when another stupid drug ad comes on trying to suck us into asking our doctor. Of course our doctor is going to prescribe it. That's what they do professionally.
Yeah.
So I just wish people would dumb up instead of dumb down and stop asking for more medications. But until you change your diet for a few weeks and you really understand what these herbs do, you're going to continue on your medicine. So, I'll never forget my last course in school, anatomy and physiology. The last question said, what did you learn about the human body this past year in anatomy and physiology? 2 words only. I wrote, it's cool. What do you write? You're 24 years old in college. And the answer blew me away. It was, it moves. The insertion, the origin of muscles and bones and fascia, it moves. What he was trying to teach us during that 1-year course is walk, jog, exercise. It was so amazing that it moves. And that was the answer. So, if you move and you change your diet, I have a favorite saying on television. If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always gotten. Yeah. If you wake up tomorrow morning in crippling pain and the bowels aren't working and the headache's bad, skin is looking bad, you're doing something wrong. Your doctor's not. You are. And yet we rely on a third party who doesn't know us to hand us another chemical. So we've got to really come out of this fog and realize we are totally in control of our good health or our poor health. Just most of us choose poor health out of a can or out of a box.
Yeah. It's too easy to just keep doing what you've always done versus doing something new and just sticking with it. I think also a big problem, like most people have, I think, is that, if they fall off the wagon at all, they just give up. Instead, you're going to fall off the wagon a lot. And you're just going to have to it takes a lot of guts to get back up on it and keep going.
And guts was the right word, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, guts.
Yeah, it's so true. Yeah, we've got 70% of our immune system in our gut, which is awesome. So you're right.
Yeah, that lovely, that awesome medical term. I used to think when people first started talking about gut permeability, I was like, is that a medical term, gut? When did that become cool?
Mommy, I hate Johnny's guts. That's all we know.
Okay, so speaking of guts, this is the last question. This is from Kevin. It says, what is a good variety of probiotics to replenish the good bacteria when the gut has been compromised, and the best way to get it so it will get past the stomach to the lower GI? I think he means like enterically coated probiotics or yogurt, or so how does that work? What's the best?
Exactly what he was asking, and that's just an exclamation on your audience. Just smart questions. Congratulations. Yes, so what enteric-coated means is it is capable of getting through the acids in the gut and ending up down in the intestines where it filters out. So what you've got to do is find a good enteric-coated probiotic. So it won't open up in your throat, or up in the upper intestines, but way down in the lower where it's utilized. And then look for, no more is the number count alone important. So you and I used to go into health food stores. Well, we have 1 million units of, lactobacillus acidophilus. Oh, yeah, we have 10 million. Oh, yeah, we have 1 billion. Oh, yeah, we have 20 billion. No more is that number important as the types of strains, the species of bacteria that are in there. There's a good one, and I'll just tell you honestly, because I'd be remiss if I didn't. There's a company that advertised on my show. So understand, folks listening to this, I get money from them. So don't just go out and buy this, but know they're darn good. They're called Dr. O'Hara's.
I was just going to say, I've been taking Dr. O'Hara's for a long time, and I don't...
They are so good.
Yeah, I don't take it every day, but like if I have my daughter, my youngest daughter, she likes eating them. Yep. And I was like, well, it's not going to hurt her. So she chews it up like it's candy, and she'd swallow it, and she thinks it's great. But all my kids are C-section kids, so I try to shove as much probiotics as I can into their
and they need it more, as you know, so that's good.
Yeah, but Dr. O'Hara's, I've got to tell you, this is like a testimonial, because it really, it's after I had my second child, I had a lot of kind of IBS type symptoms, and I swear if after like a couple 3 days, it really fixed the problem. And then, sometimes if I was getting a stomach ache or something before we really fixed our diet, I would break one open like halfway and then swallow 2 of those with like 3 of the ones that go down all the way. So
You're like, you get it. I've been working with this company since their inception a decade ago, and the story is amazing. But this is one of the few, if not the only, living, alive bacteria that you swallow. And in that little tiny black capsule is their food supply. And they eat little tiny bits of vegetables while they stay alive in that capsule for years. And then you swallow it, and these living bacteria now flourish in your gut as opposed to freeze-dried. There's some very good probiotics out there, but this you won't find in the frozen section, so you don't have to shove it in your refrigerator when you get home.
That's what I like about it the most. It is shelf-stable, isn't it? Like from fermented vegetables and stuff. I mean,
it sure is. Really that's what it eats. I mean, this is, and then Dr. O'Hara stirs, get this, you would love this as a climax to our show today. He has these huge vats. I've seen pictures because the company and I love each other. These huge metal vats. These guys get up in sterile rooms on ladders and they stir these vats. And Paco Bell and Canon D is playing in the background, all this soft classical music. He contends these bacteria are alive and respond to stimuli. I mean, this guy is just genius. So at any rate, I thought that was a shameless promotion for a company that, helps pay all of us here.
I was going to mention them anyway. I was going to mention that as our favorite probiotic here at home.
Oh, that's good. That's good. It's my favorite. It just happens that they're good.
They're good. They're a really good brand. So it's good to believe in something that, you have as an affiliate or whatever. I mean, that's the way I prefer is, I don't like affiliates that I don't actually trust and believe in and use their products because there's.
Yeah, I agree. I've taken a lot of them, but this is the one I continue taking all the time. And as we age, by the way, there are anti-aging properties in these good bacteria. I'm a guy who is 66 years old, and people can't believe that I'm 66 years old. And I think a lot of this, the past 10 years, has to do with Dr. O'Hara's probiotics, then a good exercise, sweating, detoxing, and so forth. And I don't go to a doctor. I'm worried. I have a lot of friends who are doctors, but I'm worried I'm going to be handed a drug without being told the devastating side effects of it.
Yeah, well, at least you have the benefit of a good education if they do try, if you ever need to go. But, and as you can say, you're well preserved. You can say you're well fermented.
Lactobacillus, Doug Kaufmann.
Yeah, there's probably, I think it's supposed to be 10 to 1 human cell or bacteria versus human cells. So you got to make sure they're good ones.
Exactly.
Well, that's really all the time we have for today. I wanted to say thank you for your service to our country in the military, but also through your TV show. You've kind of double whammied the country there. So
very, very sweet of you. This was really my honor, and I know you have a large audience, and boy, God bless you guys. You've got a good leader here. Thank you so much for allowing me on.
Thank you. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on to AgriCast Digest. So until next week, guys, listeners out there, good night and God bless.
You've been listening to AgriCast Digest. If you like what you just heard, please share with your friends. And don't forget to go to ChickenCoopGuides.com/podcast to download transcripts and archives of this episode, as well as take advantage of any freebies or trials offered in this episode. You can then visit our private podcast Facebook page, also linked there. This has been a Bluebird Media production.